In the shadowed depths of ancient imagination, where gods walked among mortals and divine passions shaped the very fabric of existence, there lived a force so powerful that even the mightiest of deities trembled before its influence. This is not just another tale of Greek mythology. This is the complete, unabridged story of Eros, the primordial god whose arrows could ignite love in the coldest of hearts and whose presence could turn order into beautiful chaos. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I want to take you on a journey through time itself, back to the very beginning when the universe was nothing more than swirling void and infinite possibility. We'll explore how love itself came to be, how it shaped the cosmos, and how one small winged god became the most feared and revered force in all of creation. By the end of this story, you'll understand why ancient philosophers spent lifetimes trying to comprehend Eros, why poets wrote endless verses about his power, and why his influence still echoes through every love story ever told. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Most people think they know Eros as that chubby little cherub shooting heart-shaped arrows on Valentine's Day cards. That's not even close to the truth. The real Eros was ancient beyond measure, existing before Zeus claimed his throne, before the Titans ruled the earth, and even before the first light pierced the primordial darkness. He was there at the very moment creation began, and his story will reshape everything you thought you knew about love, desire, and the forces that drive us all. So settle in, close your eyes, and let me tell you about the God who made the universe fall in love with itself. Long before Mount Olympus rose from the earth, before the first temple was built, or the first prayer uttered, there existed only chaos. Not chaos as we understand it today, with its connotations of disorder and confusion, but chaos as the ancient Greeks conceived it, the infinite, yawning void that preceded all existence. It was neither dark nor light, neither warm nor cold, but something far more profound than the absence of these things. It was pure potential, pregnant with every possibility that would ever come to pass. From this cosmic emptiness emerged the first beings, not through birth as mortals understand it, but through the sheer necessity of existence itself. These were the protogenoi, the primordial deities who would establish the fundamental forces that govern reality. And among the very first of these ancient powers was Eros, but this was not the Eros that later generations would know. This was Eros Protogonos, the firstborn, whose emergence marked the moment when the universe began to desire its own existence. Ancient theologians like Orpheus taught that without Eros, nothing else could have come into being, because creation itself required the fundamental force of attraction, the cosmic pull that would draw order from chaos and form from emptiness. Picture, if you can, that first moment when Eros opened his eyes in the swirling void. His beauty was not the pretty attractiveness we might imagine, but something far more terrible and magnificent. It was the beauty of raw creative force, of infinite potential made manifest. His wings, when they first unfurled, were not the delicate feathered appendages of later artistic depictions, but vast cosmic forces that could span galaxies. His bow was not crafted from wood and string, but woven from the very fabric of desire itself. The ancient poet Hesiod tells us that Eros was the fairest among the deathless gods, but fairness here meant something deeper than physical beauty. It meant the perfect harmony of forces that makes existence not just possible, but inevitable. When Eros took his first breath, the universe itself sighed with longing, and from that cosmic exhalation came the first winds, the first stirrings of movement in the endless void. What happened next would determine the fate of everything that would ever exist. Eros, in his primordial wisdom, understood that creation required more than just his own presence. The universe needed partners in its dance of becoming. So he reached into the depths of chaos and began to call forth his cosmic companions. First came Gaia, the earth herself, drawn into existence by Eros's irresistible pull. She emerged not as a goddess in human form, but as the very principle of solidity, of matter, of the foundation upon which all future life would rest. The moment she appeared, Eros felt the first stirring of what mortals would later call love. But this was love on a scale that defied comprehension. It was the love between complementary forces, the attraction between void and substance, between potential and manifestation. Then came Tartarus, the deep places beneath the earth, drawn forth by the same cosmic longing. If Gaia represented the nurturing, creative aspect of matter, Tartarus embodied its mysterious, hidden depths. These were not separate beings in the way we might imagine gods and goddesses, but rather aspects of a single, unified reality that Eros was weaving into existence through the power of his primordial desire. But the most significant emergence was yet to come. From the interplay of these cosmic forces, influenced by Eros's ever-present attraction, arose Nyx, the personification of night herself. Unlike the simple absence of light that mortals experience, Nyx was night as a creative force, the darkness that makes light possible, the emptiness that gives meaning to fullness. Her beauty rivaled even that of Eros himself, and when their eyes met across the newly forming cosmos, something unprecedented occurred. For the first time since creation began, Eros felt desire, not just as a cosmic force he wielded, but as a personal experience that overwhelmed even his primordial nature. This was the universe's first love story, playing out on a scale that dwarfed anything that would follow. Their attraction was so powerful that it began to generate new forms of existence simply through the intensity of their mutual longing. From their cosmic courtship came Erebus, the personification of deep shadow and darkness, but not the frightening darkness that later mortals would fear. This was the rich, fertile darkness from which all dreams spring, the creative void in which imagination takes root. Erebus became the space between day and night, the threshold where possibilities are born and transformations occur. But Eros's creative power was far from exhausted. As he moved through the newly forming cosmos, his presence began to awaken desire in everything he touched. The very elements began to long for combination and form. Fire reached out for fuel to consume, water sought vessels to fill, earth yearned for seeds to nurture, and air longed to carry the breath of life. This was not mere physical attraction, but something far more profound, the fundamental force that would drive all future evolution, all growth, all change. The ancient philosophers understood this principle well. Empedocles taught that love was one of the two fundamental forces governing reality, working in eternal tension with strife to create that endless cycle of combination and separation that drives all natural processes. But he was describing something he had glimpsed only dimly, the shadow cast by Eros's primordial presence in those first moments of creation. As eons passed in the cosmic dance of becoming, Eros began to understand the full scope of his power and responsibility. He was not merely a force of attraction, but the god of creative harmony itself. Every time two elements combined to form something new, his influence was present. Every time a star was born from the marriage of cosmic dust and gravitational pull, his arrows had found their mark. Every time life stirred in the primordial oceans that were beginning to form on the newly solidified earth, his breath whispered the possibility of growth and reproduction. But with this cosmic responsibility came a profound loneliness that only a being of Eros's nature could experience. He could inspire love in others, could witness the beautiful unions that his power made possible, but as the source of attraction itself, he remained somehow outside the very connections he created. This paradox would shape his character throughout all the ages that followed, making him simultaneously the most beloved and most isolated of all divine beings. It was during this period of cosmic loneliness that Eros made a decision that would have profound consequences for everything that followed. He chose to fragment aspects of his power to create smaller versions of himself that could experience love in ways that his cosmic nature made impossible. These fragments would eventually become known as the Eros, the multiple aspects of love and desire that mortals would later worship and fear. The first and most significant of these fragments would eventually be known as Eros the Younger, the son who would be born to Aphrodite in ages still yet to come. But that familiar version of the love god was still eons in the future. For now, there was only the primordial Eros, weaving the fundamental forces of attraction that would make all future existence possible. As we drift deeper into this ancient story, imagine yourself floating in that primordial cosmos, witnessing the very birth of desire itself. Feel the cosmic winds generated by Eros's wings. Hear the first songs of attraction echoing through the void, and understand that every feeling of love you've ever experienced traces its lineage back to these first moments when the universe learned to long for itself. The story of Eros is far from over. We've only begun to explore the depths of his influence, the complexities of his relationships with the gods and goddesses who would follow, and the profound ways his power would shape not just the cosmos, but every individual heart that would ever beat with longing. But for now, let these images of cosmic creation carry you gently towards sleep, knowing that you're connected to the very first stirrings of love in the universe. As the primordial forces settled into their cosmic dance, Eros began to perceive something that would forever change his understanding of his own nature. The universe he had helped bring into being was not static, but alive with endless potential for transformation. Each interaction between the fundamental elements created ripples of possibility that extended far beyond their immediate effects. In those early eons, time moved differently than it would for later mortals. What seemed like moments to Eros stretched across millions of years in the developing cosmos. He watched as Gaia's surface began to differentiate, forming the first mountains and valleys through processes that would later be attributed to other gods. But Eros knew the truth. Every geological formation was shaped by the attractive forces he had first awakened, the cosmic longing that drew matter together in ever more complex patterns. It was during one of these extended periods of cosmic observation that Eros encountered something unprecedented. As he drifted through the spaces between the newly formed celestial bodies, he sensed a presence that seemed to mirror his own power while remaining fundamentally different. This was Phanes, the primordial deity of procreation and new life, who had emerged from the cosmic egg that contained all potential existence. Phanes appeared to Eros as a being of impossible beauty, hermaphroditic in nature, embodying both masculine and feminine principles in perfect harmony. Golden wings sprouted from his shoulders, and his body seemed to shift and shimmer with the light of pure creativity. Most remarkably, Phanes possessed 4 eyes that could see in all directions simultaneously, perceiving past, present, future, and the eternal now with equal clarity. When these two primordial forces met, their interaction created something entirely new in the cosmos. Where Eros represented the attractive force that drew things together, Phanes embodied the generative power that created new life from those unions. Their meeting was not romantic in any sense that mortals would understand, but rather a recognition of complementary cosmic principles that would work together throughout all future ages. From their divine collaboration emerged the first concepts of fertility and abundance that would later manifest in countless forms throughout creation. Every flower that would bloom, every animal that would mate, every star that would birth planets from its cosmic material, all traced their origins to this moment when attraction met generation in the swirling depths of space. But Phanes brought Eros something even more valuable than cosmic partnership. Through those 4 all-seeing eyes, Phanes showed Eros visions of what their combined influence would create in ages to come. Eros saw glimpses of worlds teeming with life, of creatures that would experience love in ways he could barely imagine, of stories and songs and art that would celebrate the very forces he embodied. These visions filled Eros with a new kind of longing, not the cosmic desire that had driven creation itself, but something more personal and immediate. He began to yearn for direct involvement in the lives of the beings that would eventually populate the universe. He wanted to walk among them, to understand their experiences of attraction and affection, to feel love through their limited but intensely focused mortal perspectives. This yearning marked the beginning of Eros's first great transformation. Gradually, he began to condense aspects of his cosmic presence into more focused forms. The process was neither quick nor easy, requiring him to learn how to contain infinite power within finite boundaries without losing his essential nature. As he experimented with these more concentrated manifestations, Eros discovered that love itself had multiple dimensions he had never fully appreciated. There was the cosmic love that held galaxies together, but there was also the intimate love between individual beings, the protective love of parent for child, the passionate love of lovers, the loyal love of friends, and dozens of other variations that each required their own understanding and approach. Each of these discoveries led Eros to create what he began to think of as aspects of himself, specialized facets of his power that could operate independently while remaining connected to his primordial essence. These aspects would eventually become the various erotes that mortals would worship, but in these early days, they existed more as potentials than as separate entities. The most significant of these emerging aspects was the one that would eventually be known as Eros the Passionate, the force that would drive the intense romantic attractions that could override reason and caution. This aspect of his power was wild and unpredictable, capable of creating both transcendent joy and devastating heartbreak. Eros the primordial watched this part of himself develop with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing its potential for both creation and destruction. Another major aspect was what would become known as Eros the harmonious, the force that created lasting partnerships and stable relationships. This was a gentler manifestation of his power, one that worked slowly and steadily to build connections that could withstand the pressures of time and circumstance. Where Eros the passionate was like lightning, Eros the harmonious was like the steady warmth of sunlight. As these aspects of his nature became more defined, Eros began to understand that his role in creation was far more complex than he had initially realized. He was not simply the force that brought things together, but the source of all the different ways that beings could connect with one another. Every form of love that would ever exist was already present within his primordial nature, waiting for the right circumstances to manifest. This realization brought with it a new sense of responsibility that weighed heavily on Eros's cosmic consciousness. He understood now that his influence would shape not just the physical structure of the universe, but the emotional and spiritual lives of every conscious being that would ever exist. Every heart that would break, every soul that would soar with joy, every connection that would transform lives for better or worse, all would bear the mark of his primordial power. The weight of this responsibility might have crushed a lesser being, but Eros found in it a new source of purpose and determination. He began to work with even greater care and precision, learning to modulate his influence to create the optimal conditions for different types of love to flourish. He studied the delicate balance between desire and fulfillment, between longing and satisfaction, between independence and union. During this period of intense learning and growth, Eros began to sense other primordial forces stirring in the cosmic depths. Kronos, the personification of time itself, was beginning to establish the rhythms and cycles that would govern all future existence. Ananke, the force of necessity and inevitability, was weaving the fundamental laws that would constrain and direct cosmic development. These emerging powers viewed Eros with a mixture of respect and wariness. They recognized his essential role in creation, but they also understood that love, by its very nature, was a force that could disrupt the orderly progression of time and the rigid requirements of necessity. Passionate love could make mortals act irrationally, causing them to defy fate and challenge the natural order in ways that rippled through the cosmic structure. Rather than seeing this as a problem to be solved, Eros embraced his role as the wild card in cosmic development. He understood that without the unpredictable element of love, the universe would become static and sterile, locked into patterns that allowed no room for growth or surprise. His chaotic influence was not a bug in the cosmic system, but a feature that ensured continued vitality and evolution. This philosophical understanding led Eros to develop what would become his signature approach to divine intervention. Rather than imposing his will directly on situations, he preferred to create conditions that allowed love to emerge naturally and authentically. His arrows, when he eventually crafted them, would not force unwilling hearts to love, but would remove the barriers and fears that prevented existing attractions from flourishing. This subtle approach, required enormous skill and patience, qualities that Eros developed through countless eons of practice and observation. He learned to read the deep currents of emotion and desire that flowed through all conscious beings, to identify the perfect moments when a gentle nudge could transform lives without violating free will or authentic choice. As his expertise grew, so did his influence throughout the developing cosmos. Wherever life began to stir, Eros was there, ensuring that the first sparks of consciousness were accompanied by the capacity for connection and care. The very neurons that would eventually allow beings to think and feel were shaped by his primordial presence, encoded with the fundamental ability to experience attraction and affection. But perhaps most importantly, Eros began to understand that his greatest gift to creation was not the power to create love where none existed, but the ability to help beings recognize and nurture the love that was already present within them. Every heart contained infinite capacity for connection, but fear, pain, and misunderstanding could lock that capacity away, leaving souls isolated and alone. This insight would guide all of Eros's future actions as the cosmos continued its grand evolution toward complexity and consciousness. As new gods arose and claimed dominion over various aspects of existence, as mortals eventually emerged and built their civilizations, as heroes rose and fell in endless cycles of triumph and tragedy, Eros would remain constant in his mission to ensure that love, in all its myriad forms, continued to flourish and grow. The stage was now set for the next great phase of cosmic development, when the Titans would emerge to challenge the primordial order, and Eros would discover how his power interacted with the forces of ambition, conflict, and change that would reshape the universe once again. The emergence of the Titans marked a turning point in cosmic history that would test every principle Eros had established during those primordial eons. These colossal beings arose from the union of Gaia and Uranus, the Sky Father who had emerged to complement the Earth Mother's creative power, but where the primordial deities had worked in harmony with the fundamental forces of attraction and generation, the Titans brought something entirely new to existence: ambition. Eros watched with fascination as these towering figures took shape across the cosmic landscape. Each Titan embodied a different aspect of organized power and systematic control. Kronos represented time not as the gentle flow that Kronos had established, but as a force to be conquered and manipulated. Rhea embodied fertility, but fertility directed towards specific goals rather than the spontaneous abundance that had characterized earlier creation. Oceanus became the master of all waters, seeking to channel and control the very currents that had once flowed freely according to natural harmony. What intrigued Eros most about the Titans was how they seemed both to depend on his influence and to resist it simultaneously. Their very existence required the attractive forces he had awakened, the cosmic longing that drew complementary elements together, yet their nature as rulers and organizers put them fundamentally at odds with love's chaotic, unpredictable essence. This tension became most apparent in Kronos, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titans. Eros observed as this powerful being developed in relationship with time that was entirely possessive, where love typically involved letting go, allowing the beloved freedom to be themselves. Kronos sought to own every moment, to devour the future before it could escape his grasp. This fundamental incompatibility with love's nature would eventually lead to consequences that neither Kronos nor Eros could fully foresee. The first major crisis came when Kronos, driven by prophetic knowledge of his eventual overthrow, began consuming his own children immediately after birth. Eros felt each of these acts like wounds in his own cosmic consciousness. The love between parent and child, one of the most fundamental expressions of his primordial power, was being systematically destroyed by fear and the hunger for control. This pattern of behavior revealed something crucial about the nature of power when it existed without love's moderating influence. Where Eros created through attraction and harmony, raw power sought to create through domination and consumption. The results were inevitably destructive, creating voids where there should have been abundance, isolation where there should have been connection. But Eros also recognized an opportunity in this cosmic tragedy. Each act of lovelessness created a corresponding hunger for authentic connection that rippled through the universe. The very extremity of Kronos' behavior was generating its own corrective force, a longing for something better that would eventually manifest as the next generation of divine beings. This understanding led Eros to make one of his most significant interventions in cosmic affairs. When Rhea came to him, desperate to save her youngest child Zeus from Kronos' consuming hunger, Eros provided something more valuable than protection. He gave her hope, the specific form of love that allows beings to act courageously even when facing overwhelming odds. The hope that Eros instilled in Rhea was not mere optimism, but a deep understanding that love ultimately possesses more creative power than fear or ambition. This knowledge allowed her to devise the strategy that saved Zeus, replacing the infant with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes while spiriting the real child away to safety. But Eros' intervention went deeper than this single act of rescue. As Zeus grew to maturity in his hidden cave on Crete, Eros ensured that the future king of the gods would understand love not as weakness or distraction, but as the ultimate source of strength and wisdom. This education would prove crucial in the great war that was to come. The relationship between Eros and Zeus during this formative period was complex and multifaceted. Zeus possessed natural charisma and leadership ability, but these gifts could have easily developed into the same kind of consuming ambition that had corrupted Kronos. Eros worked subtly to ensure that Zeus's power would be tempered by genuine care for others and understanding of the interconnected nature of all existence. This guidance took many forms throughout Zeus's youth. Sometimes Eros appeared as inspiration, filling the young god with visions of a cosmos where strength served love rather than dominating it. Other times, he manifested as the attractive force that drew allies to Zeus's cause, helping him understand that true leadership meant inspiring others rather than controlling them. The most crucial lesson Eros taught Zeus was the difference between love and possession. Where Kronos had sought to own time, Zeus learned to work within time's natural flow. Where Kronos had consumed his children out of fear, Zeus would learn to nurture and guide his offspring while allowing them their own destinies. Where Kronos had ruled through terror, Zeus would discover the power of ruling through inspiration and earned loyalty. These lessons proved essential when Zeus finally reached maturity and the great war between Titans and Olympians began. The Titanomachy, as this cosmic conflict came to be known, was not simply a struggle between old gods and new, but a fundamental contest between different approaches to divine power and cosmic organization. Eros found himself in a unique position during this war. His loyalty was not to any particular faction, but to love itself and the creative principles that had guided cosmic development since the beginning. This meant supporting whichever side would ultimately create better conditions for love to flourish throughout the universe. Initially, this seemed to favor the Olympians, whose approach to power was more collaborative and less rigidly controlling than the Titans, but Eros also recognized valuable qualities in some of the Titans that he hoped would survive the coming transformation. Prometheus's love for mortals, Rhea's nurturing maternal nature, and even aspects of Kronos' relationship with time contained elements that could enrich the cosmic order if properly integrated. The war itself tested every aspect of Eros' nature and abilities. The sheer scale of the conflict, with cosmic forces clashing across multiple dimensions of reality, created chaos that threatened to undo much of the careful work of creation. Mountains were hurled like stones, stars were extinguished in the crossfire, and the very fabric of space-time rippled under the impact of divine battles. But within this apparent destruction, Eros perceived something remarkable occurring. The intensity of the conflict was forging new forms of connection and loyalty among the combatants. Warriors on both sides were discovering the power of fighting for something greater than themselves, experiencing forms of love they had never known in peacetime. The bonds formed between Zeus and his brothers, Poseidon and Hades, during their shared struggle would prove crucial to the stability of the coming cosmic order. These were not relationships of mere convenience or political alliance, but deep connections forged in the crucible of cosmic battle. Eros recognized in these bonds the foundation of a more stable and loving form of divine governance than had ever existed before. Similarly, the alliances that formed between the younger Olympians and certain Titans who chose to switch sides revealed love's power to transcend even the deepest divisions. When beings could recognize their fundamental interconnection despite surface differences, they became capable of creating something greater than either could achieve alone. The turning point of the war came when Zeus, acting on wisdom that Eros had helped instill in him, made the decision to free the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires from their imprisonment in Tartarus. This act required Zeus to overcome not just external obstacles, but his own fears about unleashing such powerful and potentially dangerous allies. The choice to trust these ancient beings, despite the risks involved, demonstrated that Zeus had truly understood Eros' teachings about the relationship between love and courage. True love always involved risk, the willingness to be vulnerable for the sake of connection and growth. By freeing the imprisoned giants, Zeus was betting everything on love's power to inspire loyalty and cooperation. The gamble paid off magnificently. The Cyclopes, grateful for their liberation, forged the legendary weapons that would ensure Olympian victory: the thunderbolts for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, and the helm of invisibility for Hades. More importantly, their willing service demonstrated the power of leadership based on liberation and trust rather than fear and control. The Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants, proved even more decisive in the final battles. Their overwhelming physical power freely given in service to those who had freed them, tipped the balance decisively in favor of the Olympians. But Eros understood that their true significance lay not in their strength, but in what their loyalty represented, the triumph of love-based relationships over power-based ones. As the war reached its climax, and the Titans faced inevitable defeat, Eros faced one of the most difficult decisions of his cosmic existence. Kronos, the leader of the losing side, was also the being whose relationship with time and power had created some of the most beautiful and terrible moments in cosmic history. Despite his consuming nature, Kronos had also been responsible for establishing many of the rhythms and cycles that made complex life possible. The question of what to do with the defeated Titans would determine much about the character of the new cosmic order. Would the Olympians simply replace one form of tyranny with another? Or would they find a way to integrate the valuable aspects of Titan wisdom while preventing the destructive excesses that had made war inevitable? Eros worked carefully behind the scenes to influence this crucial decision, appearing to Zeus and his allies in dreams and moments of inspiration. The message he conveyed was complex but essential. True victory required not the destruction of the defeated, but their transformation and integration into a better system. This guidance led to one of the most remarkable acts of cosmic statesmanship in divine history. Rather than executing the Titans or subjecting them to eternal torment, Zeus chose to imprison most of them in Tartarus while offering rehabilitation and eventual reintegration to those willing to accept the new order. Some Titans, like Prometheus and Rhea, were welcomed immediately into the Olympian family. Others would have to prove their commitment to the principles of love and cooperation over time. As the dust settled from the Great War and the new cosmic order began to take shape, Eros found himself facing an entirely new set of challenges and opportunities. The Olympian gods, while more aligned with love's principles than their predecessors, were also more complex and individualistic than the primordial forces he had worked with before. Each had their own personality, desires, and spheres of influence that would need to be balanced and harmonized. This new complexity would require Eros to develop new aspects of his power and new approaches to divine intervention. The age of simple, cosmic scale forces was ending, and the era of personal relationships, individual choice, and moral complexity was about to begin. The stage was set for the next great chapter in the story of love's influence on the universe. The establishment of the new Olympian order presented Eros with challenges he had never encountered during the primordial ages, where the ancient forces had operated according to simple, universal principles. The Olympian gods were complex personalities with individual desires, fears, and ambitions that often conflicted with one another. Each deity claimed dominion over specific aspects of existence, creating a web of competing interests that required careful navigation. Zeus, now established as king of the gods, ruled from his magnificent palace atop Mount Olympus with a mixture of wisdom and impetuosity that both impressed and concerned Eros. The young god had indeed learned the lessons about love-based leadership, but he also possessed an appetite for both power and pleasure that could lead him into complicated situations. His numerous romantic entanglements would soon become legendary, each one presenting Eros with unique challenges, about the nature of divine love and its consequences. Poseidon had claimed dominion over all waters, from the vast oceans to the smallest streams, and his temperament reflected the dual nature of his realm. Like the sea itself, he could be calm and nurturing one moment, then wild and destructive the next. His relationships were equally turbulent, characterized by passionate intensity that could create both profound joy and devastating heartbreak. Eros found himself constantly working to help Poseidon understand that true strength lay not in overwhelming others with the force of his emotions, but in creating space for mutual respect and genuine connection. Hades presented perhaps the most interesting case for Eros to consider. The Lord of the Underworld had drawn the most challenging domain in the division of cosmic territories, ruling over the realm of the dead, where love might seem to have little relevance. Yet Eros recognized that Hades' domain was actually one of the most important for his work. Death gave urgency and meaning to love, making mortal connections precious precisely because they were temporary. The underworld would become a place where the true depth of loving relationships would be tested and revealed. The female Olympians brought their own complexities to the divine family structure. Hera, Zeus's wife and queen of the gods, embodied the principle of sacred marriage and legitimate partnership. Her fierce protection of the institution of marriage often put her at odds with Zeus's wandering affections, creating conflicts that rippled throughout the divine realm. Eros found himself walking a careful line, supporting Hera's commitment to marital fidelity, while also understanding Zeus's nature as a god whose very essence involved spreading divine influence throughout the cosmos. Demeter, goddess of agriculture and the harvest, represented a form of love that Eros found deeply satisfying to work with. Her devotion to nurturing growth and providing sustenance embodied the practical, life-sustaining aspects of care and affection. Yet even she would face challenges that would test the limits of maternal love, particularly in her relationship with her daughter Persephone, whose story would become one of the most profound explorations of love, loss, and renewal in all of mythology. Athena emerged from Zeus's head, fully grown and armored, representing wisdom and strategic warfare. Her birth itself challenged conventional understanding of love and family relationships, as she had no mother in the traditional sense. Yet Eros recognized in her a different form of love, the passionate dedication to justice, knowledge, and the protection of civilization. Her love was not romantic or familial, but civic and intellectual, proving that his influence extended far beyond the personal realm into the very structures of society and culture. Apollo, god of music, poetry, and prophecy, embodied the artistic and inspirational aspects of love. His connection to the muses and his role as patron of creative endeavors made him a natural ally for Eros, who understood that art and beauty were among love's most powerful expressions. Yet Apollo's relationships were often complicated by his own perfection and divine status, which could intimidate potential partners and create barriers to genuine intimacy. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, chose a path that initially seemed to reject Eros's influence entirely. As goddess of the hunt and protector of virginity, she surrounded herself with attendants who had sworn off romantic love. Yet Eros recognized that her fierce independence and protective care for her followers represented another valid expression of love. Her rejection of romantic entanglement was not a denial of love itself, but a choice to focus her loving energy on different forms of relationship and responsibility. Aphrodite's eventual emergence would present Eros with perhaps his most complex relationship of all. When she rose from the sea foam, born from the castrated genitals of Uranus, she embodied physical beauty and sexual desire in ways that both complemented and complicated Eros's more comprehensive understanding of love. Their relationship would evolve through multiple forms, sometimes as mother and son, sometimes as partners in the work of inspiring attraction, and sometimes as rivals with different approaches to the same fundamental force. But before Aphrodite's dramatic entrance, Eros found himself dealing with the immediate challenges of helping the Olympian family establish stable relationships with one another. The gods' immortality meant that every conflict, every slight, every moment of jealousy could potentially last forever unless properly resolved. Unlike mortals, who might simply avoid difficult relatives or allow time to heal wounds, the gods were bound together in eternal family relationships that required constant attention and care. This situation led Eros to develop new techniques for divine intervention. Rather than the sweeping cosmic scale influences he had wielded during the primordial ages, he now needed to work with surgical precision, addressing specific relationship dynamics without disrupting the larger balance of divine power. He learned to appear in dreams and moments of contemplation, offering insights that seemed to arise naturally from the gods' own reflections rather than external divine command. One of his most significant early interventions involved helping Zeus understand the difference between love and conquest. The king of the gods had a tendency to pursue romantic interests with the same overwhelming force he had used to defeat the Titans, not recognizing that love required vulnerability and mutual consent rather than dominant power. Through carefully orchestrated encounters and subtle influences, Eros helped Zeus discover that his most satisfying relationships were those where he allowed himself to be truly seen and accepted, rather than simply admired and feared. This lesson proved crucial when Zeus began his relationship with Metis, the Titaness of wisdom and cunning thought. Unlike his previous conquests, Zeus found himself genuinely challenged and inspired by Metis's intelligence and strategic mind. Their courtship became a dance of equals, each recognizing and respecting the other's unique gifts. Eros watched with satisfaction as Zeus learned to value partnership over possession, even as he sensed that this relationship would eventually face challenges that would test both gods' commitment to these principles. The relationship between Zeus and Metis also revealed something important about the evolution of love in the new cosmic order, where the primordial deities had represented pure forces and principles. The Olympians were developing individual personalities that could grow and change through their relationships with others. Love was no longer just a cosmic force that held the universe together, but a personal experience that could transform the very nature of those who embraced it fully. This transformation was not without its dangers. As the gods became more individualized and emotionally complex, they also became capable of deeper hurt and more destructive jealousies. The intense emotions that could inspire the greatest acts of love could also fuel the most devastating conflicts. Eros found himself constantly working to help the divine family navigate these intense feelings without allowing them to spiral into cosmic catastrophe. the challenge became even more complex when mortals began to emerge and develop their own relationships with the gods. These new beings, created in part through the collaborative efforts of various Olympians, possessed something that even the gods envied: the urgency that comes from limited lifespan. Mortal love burned brighter and more intensely precisely because it was temporary, creating forms of passion and devotion that could move even immortal hearts. The interactions between gods and mortals created entirely new categories of relationship that required Eros's careful attention. Divine mortal romances carried the potential for both transcendent beauty and tragic destruction, as the fundamental differences in nature between immortal and mortal beings created inherent tensions that were difficult to resolve. Yet these relationships also produced some of the most heroic and inspiring figures in cosmic history: demigod children who embodied the best qualities of both divine and mortal natures. Eros began to understand that his role was evolving beyond simply inspiring attraction to actively teaching the art of love itself. The gods and mortals alike needed guidance, not just in falling in love, but in sustaining and deepening their connections over time. This realization led him to develop what would become his most sophisticated and influential techniques for fostering lasting relationships. The first principle he established was that genuine love required seeing and accepting the beloved as they truly were, rather than as idealized projections of one's own desires. This meant helping lovers move beyond the initial intoxication of attraction to discover the real person beneath the surface appeal. For immortal beings, this process could take centuries or millennia, while mortals had to accomplish it within the span of a human lifetime. The second principle involved understanding that love was not a static state, but a dynamic process that required constant renewal and recommitment. Even the most passionate initial attraction would fade without ongoing effort to understand, appreciate, and support the beloved's growth and development. This principle proved particularly challenging for the gods, whose immortal nature could lead them to take relationships for granted or assume that initial feelings would remain unchanged forever. The third principle, perhaps the most difficult for divine beings to accept, was that true love sometimes required sacrifice and compromise. The gods were accustomed to having their desires fulfilled immediately and completely, but love often demanded that they consider another's needs as equally important to their own. This did not mean self-negation or the loss of individual identity, but rather the expansion of identity to include genuine concern for another's well-being. These principles would be tested repeatedly as the Olympian age progressed and the gods encountered increasingly complex relationship challenges. Each divine romance, each family conflict, each interaction with mortal lovers would provide new opportunities for Eros to refine his understanding and develop more sophisticated approaches to fostering authentic love in all its myriad forms. The stage was now set for the great love stories that would define the classical age of mythology, tales that would explore every possible variation of attraction, devotion, loss, and renewal. But before those famous narratives could unfold, Eros would face his greatest personal challenge yet: the emergence of Aphrodite and the need to define his own relationship with the goddess who would become most closely associated with his domain. As the cosmic order continued to evolve and stabilize, Eros sensed that his own nature was about to undergo another fundamental transformation, one that would determine not only his future role among the gods, but his relationship with the countless mortals who would seek his blessing in the ages to come. The transformation Eros sensed approaching began not with grand celestial announcements or cosmic upheavals, but with something far more subtle and profound. As he moved through the established rhythms of the new Olympian order, he began to notice changes in his own consciousness that reflected the evolving nature of love itself in this more complex divine society. Where once his awareness had been purely cosmic, encompassing entire galaxies and eons with equal clarity, Eros found himself increasingly drawn to individual moments and personal experiences. A fleeting glance between young lovers in a mortal city could capture his attention as completely as the formation of new star systems once had. This shift was not a diminishment of his power, but rather a refinement of it, like light passing through a prism to reveal colors that had always existed but never been separately visible. This new sensitivity to individual experience coincided with his growing understanding that the gods themselves were developing something unprecedented in cosmic history. Genuine personalities that could evolve and surprise even themselves. Zeus was no longer simply the embodiment of sky power and royal authority, but a complex individual capable of growth, regret, and unexpected moments of profound wisdom. Hera was not merely the principle of marriage, but a goddess whose fierce loyalty was matched by equally intense capacity for both forgiveness and righteous anger. These developments fascinated Eros because they represented love's ultimate achievement in creation. Through countless relationships and experiences, the gods were becoming more than the sum of their original functions. They were developing the capacity for authentic choice, genuine surprise, and real transformation through their connections with others. This was love's greatest gift, not merely the ability to attract and connect, but the power to become more than one had been before through the influence of genuine relationship. But this evolution also created new challenges that tested Eros's understanding of his own nature. As the gods became more individualized, they also became more unpredictable. Their choices were no longer determined solely by their essential nature or cosmic function, but by the complex interplay of experience, emotion, and personal growth that characterized truly conscious beings. This unpredictability was most evident in Zeus's continuing romantic adventures, which had begun to follow patterns that both delighted and concerned Eros. The king of the gods was not simply collecting conquests or expanding divine influence through procreation, but genuinely falling in love with each new partner he encountered. Each relationship revealed different aspects of his character and challenged him to grow in unexpected directions. With Europa, the beautiful mortal princess, Zeus discovered the joy of playful romance and the pleasure of courtship that involved genuine creativity and effort. His transformation into a magnificent white bull to win her attention was not merely a display of divine power, but an expression of artistic inspiration motivated by authentic affection. The relationship that followed was characterized by mutual delight and discovery rather than simple divine conquest. His connection with Leda introduced him to the complexities of love that must exist within established mortal relationships and social structures. The delicate balance required to honor both his feelings for Leda and her existing commitments to family and community taught Zeus important lessons about the difference between selfish desire and genuinely caring love. Each of these relationships also produced children who embodied different aspects of the divine mortal synthesis that was becoming increasingly important in the cosmic order. Helen of Troy, Perseus, Heracles, and countless others represented not just powerful individuals, but living symbols of the potential that existed when divine love engaged authentically with mortal experience. Eros watched these developments with growing understanding of his own evolving role. He was no longer primarily a cosmic force maintaining universal balance, but something more like a teacher and guide helping conscious beings navigate the complexities of genuine relationship. This shift required him to develop new aspects of his nature that could operate on the intimate, personal scale while maintaining connection to his primordial cosmic understanding. The most significant manifestation of this evolution was his growing ability to appear in forms that could interact directly with both gods and mortals as individuals, rather than simply as overwhelming cosmic influences. These manifestations were not diminishments of his power, but focused expressions of it, like a vast orchestra concentrating all its complexity into a single, perfectly played note. When he appeared to troubled lovers, Eros no longer arrived as an irresistible force that simply overwhelmed their doubts and fears. Instead, he came as insight, inspiration, and understanding that helped them recognize what was already present in their own hearts. His arrows became metaphors for moments of clarity that removed the barriers preventing authentic connection rather than weapons that imposed artificial attraction. This approach proved particularly important in his interactions with the growing population of mortals, whose brief lifespans made their love both more urgent and more precious than anything the immortal gods could experience. Mortal lovers faced challenges that were unknown to divine beings: the certainty of eventual separation through death, the limitations imposed by physical needs and social structures, and the pressure to make the most of their limited time together. Yet these very limitations often produced forms of love that were more intense and authentic than anything Eros had witnessed among the immortals, mortal couples who faced adversity together, who chose to remain faithful despite temptation, who continued loving even when passion faded into quieter but deeper affection, demonstrated aspects of love that even the gods could learn from. Eros found himself increasingly drawn to these mortal love stories, not because they required his intervention, but because they taught him new dimensions of his own nature. From elderly couples who had spent decades learning to truly know and accept each other, he discovered the patience and forgiveness that allowed love to mature and deepen over time. From young lovers whose time together was cut short by war or disease, he learned about the intensity that comes from recognizing love's precious fragility. Perhaps most importantly, from mortals who chose to love despite having been hurt before, Eros learned about courage as an essential component of genuine affection. The willingness to risk vulnerability again after experiencing betrayal or loss required a form of bravery that was entirely different from the physical courage displayed in battle. This emotional courage became one of the qualities that Eros most admired and sought to foster in all his interactions. These lessons from mortal experience began to influence how Eros approached his work with the gods as well. He started helping divine beings understand that their immortality, rather than making love easier, actually made it more challenging in some ways. Without the urgency imposed by limited time, immortal relationships could become complacent or stagnant. Without the fear of loss, gods might not fully appreciate what they had until it was threatened. This understanding led Eros to develop more sophisticated techniques for helping immortal beings maintain the vitality and growth that characterized the best mortal relationships. He learned to create gentle challenges and opportunities for renewal that kept divine couples engaged with each other's continuing development, rather than allowing them to settle into unchanging patterns. The complexity of this work was dramatically illustrated when Hades, the usually solitary lord of the underworld, first encountered Persephone in her mother's flower-filled meadows. The attraction between them was immediate and profound, but it also represented a collision between two entirely different approaches to existence. Hades embodied the serious, responsible, somewhat melancholy nature required to rule the realm of the dead, while Persephone radiated the joyful, spontaneous energy of eternal spring. Eros recognized that this attraction, if handled properly, could create a relationship that enriched both deities while serving important cosmic functions. Hades needed the lightness and joy that Persephone represented, while she could benefit from his depth, wisdom, and understanding of life's more serious dimensions. Together, they could embody the complete cycle of existence, from the bright growth of spring through the necessary rest of winter. But the courtship would require careful handling to avoid the kind of traumatic disruption that could damage both individuals and upset the cosmic balance. Hades' natural inclination toward direct action and immediate results could easily overwhelm Persephone's need for choice and gradual discovery. Meanwhile, her mother Demeter's protective instincts could prevent the relationship from developing at all if she perceived any threat to her daughter's happiness. The solution Eros developed demonstrated his growing sophistication in managing complex relationship dynamics. Rather than simply inspiring sudden passion that might lead to impulsive actions, he began working gradually with both Hades and Persephone to help them recognize their complementary natures and the potential for mutual enrichment that their union represented. With Hades, Eros worked to soften his somewhat grim worldview by helping him see the beauty and renewal that existed even in his realm of the dead. The underworld was not simply a place of ending, but also of transformation and eventual rebirth. The seeds that lay dormant in winter soil were not dead, but waiting for the right conditions to burst forth with new life. This understanding helped Hades appreciate that love, rather than being a distraction from his serious duties, could actually enhance his effectiveness as a ruler by giving him deeper insight into the cyclical nature of existence. With Persephone, Eros worked more subtly to expand her understanding of love beyond the simple joy and pleasure she had known in her mother's eternal spring. He helped her recognize that genuine love sometimes required accepting challenges and growing through difficulty. The deepest forms of affection were not those that avoided all pain and struggle, but those that found meaning and beauty even in life's darker moments. This preparation was essential because the relationship between Hades and Persephone would ultimately require both of them to transform In fundamental ways, Persephone would need to develop the maturity and wisdom required to share rulership of the underworld, while Hades would need to learn how to open his heart to joy and renewal without abandoning his essential responsibilities. The famous abduction that would eventually bring them together was not, from Eros's perspective, the violent crime that some later stories would portray, but rather the inevitable culmination of a deep attraction that had been growing gradually as both deities learned to recognize their complementary natures. The dramatic nature of their union reflected not callous disregard for Persephone's autonomy, but the cosmic significance of their relationship and the profound transformation it would require from both participants. The resulting marriage would become one of the most important and instructive relationships in divine history, demonstrating how genuine love could bridge even the most fundamental differences in nature and perspective. Their annual separation and reunion would provide the mythological explanation for the changing seasons. But more importantly, it would illustrate how healthy relationships require both togetherness and independence, both commitment and individual growth. As Eros watched these great divine relationships develop and mature, he began to understand that his own nature was approaching another crucial transformation. The emergence of Aphrodite from the sea foam was imminent, and with her arrival would come new challenges and opportunities that would reshape his role in the cosmic order once again. The goddess of beauty and physical love would embody aspects of his influence that had never before been personified separately, creating both collaboration and potential conflict that would define the next age of his existence, the next age of his existence. The moment of Aphrodite's birth marked a turning point that would forever alter the cosmic understanding of love itself. As the goddess emerged from the churning sea foam, born from the severed essence of Uranus cast into the primordial waters, Eros felt a recognition so profound it shook the very foundations of his ancient consciousness. Here was beauty incarnate, desire made manifest, the physical expression of attraction that had remained abstract and cosmic throughout all his eons of existence. Yet this recognition was accompanied by something Eros had never experienced before: uncertainty about his own identity and purpose. Aphrodite's emergence seemed to claim territories of love that he had always considered his exclusive domain, where he had been the sole divine embodiment of attraction and affection. Suddenly there existed another whose very presence commanded desire, whose beauty could inspire passion without any conscious effort or divine intervention. The initial encounter between these two primordial forces occurred not in the grand halls of Olympus or the cosmic void where Eros had conducted his earliest work, but in a quiet grove beside the sea where Aphrodite had first set foot on dry land. The meeting was inevitable, drawn by the same attractive forces that had governed Eros's existence since the beginning of time. Yet it carried implications that neither divine being fully understood. When their eyes first met, Eros experienced something he had helped countless others feel, but had never known himself. The breathtaking moment when attraction becomes mutual recognition, when two souls perceive in each other the perfect complement to their own nature. Aphrodite represented everything he had always worked to inspire in others: beauty that transcended mere physical appearance to become a force of transformation, desire that could elevate souls beyond their ordinary limitations, love that could create new realities through the sheer intensity of its expression. But she also represented a challenge to his cosmic authority that was both thrilling and troubling. Where Eros had always worked through subtle influence and gentle guidance, Aphrodite's power was immediate and overwhelming. Her mere presence could inspire passion in the coldest hearts, could turn the most rational minds toward irrational devotion, could reshape entire kingdoms through the simple act of appearing before their rulers. The relationship that developed between them would become one of the most complex and influential partnerships in divine history. Sometimes they worked together as perfect allies, their complementary abilities creating experiences of love that surpassed anything either could achieve alone. At other times, they found themselves in subtle competition, each representing different aspects of love's power that could conflict as easily as they could harmonize. Their first collaboration involved helping Zeus navigate one of his most significant romantic challenges. The king of the gods had become genuinely enamored with a mortal woman whose beauty was legendary even among divine beings, but whose heart remained untouched by his previous attempts at courtship. This woman, Danae, possessed a rare combination of physical loveliness and spiritual strength that made her resistant to ordinary forms of divine influence. The challenge intrigued both Eros and Aphrodite because it required them to work beyond their usual methods. Eros's subtle psychological influence and Aphrodite's overwhelming physical presence had both proven insufficient to touch Danae's carefully guarded heart. She had recognized the divine nature of her suitor, and rather than being flattered or intimidated, had responded with intelligent caution that impressed even the gods who sought to win her affection. The solution they developed together demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of love that emerged when their different approaches were properly integrated rather than overwhelming Danae with irresistible attraction or subtle manipulation of her emotions. They worked to create conditions where genuine affection could develop naturally and authentically. Eros contributed his deep understanding of the psychological conditions necessary for trust and emotional intimacy. He helped Zeus recognize that Danae's resistance stemmed not from coldness or inability to love, but from wisdom about the dangers that divine attention could bring to mortal lives. Her caution was actually a sign of the depth and authenticity that made her worth pursuing in the first place. Aphrodite provided the inspiration for Zeus to express his affection through beauty rather than power. Instead of appearing in his full divine majesty, which could only intimidate, or disguising himself through deception, which would violate the trust necessary for genuine love, Zeus learned to manifest his care through acts of subtle beauty that honored Danae's intelligence and independence. The courtship that resulted was unlike any divine mortal romance that had preceded it. Zeus appeared to Danae as golden light that filled her chamber with warmth and radiance, but made no demands and imposed no overwhelming presence. He simply offered beauty as a gift, asking nothing in return except the privilege of brightening her days through his gentle presence. This patient approach allowed Danae to discover her own attraction gradually and authentically. She began to look forward to the daily visits of the mysterious light, to find comfort in its warmth, and eventually to feel genuine affection for the consciousness she sensed behind the beautiful manifestation. When she finally spoke to the light and invited it to reveal its true nature, her invitation was given freely rather than extracted through divine compulsion. The success of this collaboration taught both Eros and Aphrodite important lessons about the evolution of their own relationship. They discovered that their different approaches to inspiring love were not competing methodologies, but complementary aspects of a more complete understanding. Eros's patience and psychological insight, combined with Aphrodite's immediate beauty and passionate intensity, could create experiences of love that were both authentic and transformative. This partnership became the foundation for their work throughout the classical age of mythology, though it would be tested repeatedly by the complex demands of divine politics and the increasingly sophisticated emotional needs of both gods and mortals. Their relationship itself became a model for how different types of divine consciousness could collaborate while maintaining their individual natures and spheres of influence. The arrangement they eventually established reflected both practical necessity and genuine affection between them. In some stories and traditions, Aphrodite would be portrayed as Eros's mother, reflecting her role as the source of the physical beauty and sexual desire that his Eros often inspired. In others, they appeared as partners or even lovers, representing the integration of different aspects of love into unified experience. But perhaps most significantly, their collaboration led to Eros's development of his most famous and enduring manifestation, the youthful winged archer whose golden arrows could inspire love and whose leaden ones could prevent it. This form represented the perfect synthesis of his cosmic wisdom with Aphrodite's understanding of beauty, desire, and immediate emotional impact. The arrows themselves were marvels of divine craftsmanship that embodied sophisticated understanding of how attraction actually functioned in conscious beings. The golden arrows did not create love where none existed, but rather removed the fears, doubts, and artificial barriers that prevented existing attractions from developing. They worked by clearing away the psychological obstacles that kept compatible souls from recognizing their natural affinity for each other. The leaden arrows served an equally important function by protecting individuals from inappropriate or destructive attractions. They did not make people incapable of love, but rather helped them resist influences that would lead to harmful relationships or prevented them from recognizing genuine compatibility when it appeared. The precision required to use these arrows effectively demanded that Eros develop new levels of discernment and wisdom. Each intervention required careful analysis of the individuals involved, their circumstances, their capacity for growth, and the potential consequences of their union or separation. A poorly aimed arrow could create years of unnecessary suffering or prevent a connection that could have enriched multiple lives. This responsibility weighed heavily on Eros as he began to understand the full scope of his influence on both divine and mortal affairs. Every love story that unfolded carried his fingerprints. Every heartbreak reflected decisions he had made about when and how to intervene. The joy of successful matches was balanced by the sorrow of relationships that failed despite his best efforts, teaching him that even divine power had limits when it came to the complexities of free will and individual choice. The development of his archer persona also marked Eros's growing integration into the social dynamics of the Olympian court. where he had once operated primarily as an invisible cosmic force, he now appeared regularly at divine gatherings, participated in discussions about cosmic policy, and developed personal relationships with individual gods and goddesses that went beyond his professional responsibilities. His friendship with Apollo, god of music and poetry, proved particularly enriching for both deities. Apollo's artistic sensibilities helped Eros understand how love could be expressed through creative endeavors, while Eros's deep knowledge of emotional dynamics enhanced Apollo's ability to create works that truly moved their audiences. Their collaboration produced some of the most beautiful love songs and poems in divine history, works that continued to inspire mortal artists for generations. The relationship with Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, presented more complex challenges. Her fierce independence and rejection of romantic entanglement initially seemed to place her outside Eros's sphere of influence entirely. Yet as their acquaintance deepened, Eros came to appreciate that her protective love for her followers and her passionate dedication to her principles represented forms of devotion that were just as genuine and powerful as romantic attraction. This understanding broadened Eros's conception of his own domain beyond the romantic and sexual love that had dominated his earlier work. He began to recognize and nurture the love between friends, the devotion between teachers and students, the protective care of communities for their members, and countless other forms of connection that enriched conscious existence without necessarily involving romantic attraction. The integration of these broader forms of love into his understanding created new opportunities for intervention and assistance throughout the divine and mortal realms. Eros found himself helping to forge alliances between former enemies, inspiring loyalty between rulers and subjects, and fostering the kind of communal bonds that allowed civilizations to flourish and grow. These expanded responsibilities also brought him into closer contact with the daily lives of mortals, whose brief lifespans and intense experiences continued to fascinate and instruct him. He began spending more time among human communities, sometimes appearing in recognizable form, other times working through inspiration and coincidence to bring compatible souls together or help established relationships overcome temporary difficulties. The mortal realm presented unique challenges that tested every aspect of Eros's evolving wisdom. Unlike the gods, who had eternity to work through relationship problems and unlimited resources to support their romantic endeavors, mortals faced practical constraints that could make love seem impossible even when the emotional connection was genuine, and strong social conventions that prohibited relationships between different classes, economic pressures that forced families to arrange marriages based on financial rather than emotional considerations, and political conflicts that turned lovers into enemies, all required Eros to develop increasingly subtle and creative approaches to his work. Some of his most satisfying interventions involved helping mortals overcome these external obstacles through the kind of creative problem solving that love could inspire when properly channeled. He learned to work through dreams and moments of inspiration to suggest solutions that seemed to arise naturally from the lover's own ingenuity rather than divine intervention. Other situations required more direct action, though always carefully calibrated to respect mortal autonomy and the natural consequences of human choices. Sometimes this meant creating opportunities for for secret meetings between separated lovers. Other times, it involved inspiring allies who could provide practical assistance, and occasionally it required protecting vulnerable individuals from those who would exploit or harm them. The complexity of this work was further increased by the need to coordinate with other divine beings whose spheres of influence overlapped with matters of love and relationship. Hera's fierce protection of marriage as an institution sometimes conflicted with Eros's support for authentic emotional connections that might threaten existing arrangements. Demeter's maternal protectiveness could interfere with her daughter's romantic development, while Ares's aggressive nature might turn healthy competition for a lover's attention into destructive conflict. These divine politics required Eros to develop diplomatic skills that complemented his understanding of emotional dynamics. He learned to present his interventions in ways that respected other gods' legitimate concerns while still achieving his primary goal of fostering authentic love and connection. This often meant finding creative solutions that served multiple divine interests simultaneously. The most challenging of these diplomatic situations arose when his work brought him into conflict with the Fates, those ancient powers who determine the destiny of both gods and mortals. The Fates operated according to principles of cosmic necessity that sometimes seemed incompatible with love's chaotic, unpredictable nature. When the Fates had decreed that certain individuals should remain apart, either for their own development or to serve larger cosmic purposes, Eros faced agonizing decisions about whether to respect their authority or follow his own understanding of what would serve love's highest purposes. These conflicts tested not only his wisdom, but his fundamental understanding of his role in the cosmic order. The resolution of these tensions would ultimately require Eros to develop an even more sophisticated understanding of the relationship between individual choice, cosmic necessity, and the ultimate nature of love itself. This understanding would be crucial as the age of heroes dawned and love stories began to intertwine with the grand narratives of human achievement and divine intervention that would define the classical period of mythology. As mortals developed more complex civilizations and began to produce individuals whose heroic achievements rivaled those of the gods themselves, Eros would find his work becoming both more important and more challenging than ever before. The love stories of heroes like Perseus and Andromeda, Theseus and Ariadne, and countless others would test every aspect of his wisdom while creating new models for how divine and mortal love could inspire achievement that transcended the limitations of ordinary existence. The stage was set for the golden age of heroic romance, when love would prove itself capable not only of inspiring personal happiness, but of motivating the kind of noble actions that could reshape the world itself. In these coming stories, Eros would discover the ultimate expression of his cosmic purpose, love as the force that could elevate both individual souls and entire civilizations toward their highest potential. The emergence of the heroic age brought with it challenges that would test every aspect of Eros's accumulated wisdom about the nature of love and its role in shaping destiny. These were no longer the simple attraction stories of earlier eons, where cosmic forces aligned themselves according to primordial principles. Now, love intersected with ambition, honor, duty, and the complex moral frameworks that governed heroic society. The heroes themselves represented something unprecedented in the cosmic order. Born from unions between gods and mortals, they possessed divine heritage that made them capable of extraordinary achievements, yet retained enough mortality to understand the urgency and passion that drove human hearts. Their love stories would unfold against backdrops of epic quests, terrible monsters, and political intrigue that could determine the fate of entire kingdoms. Perseus, son of Zeus, and the beautiful Danae exemplified this new breed of lover-hero whose romantic destiny became inseparable from his heroic calling when he encountered Andromeda chained to a rocky cliff as sacrifice to the sea monster Cetus. Eros recognized immediately that this meeting represented far more than a simple rescue scenario. The attraction between these two young people carried the potential to reshape the political landscape of the ancient world. Andromeda's beauty was legendary, surpassing even that of the sea nymphs whose jealousy had brought about her terrible predicament. But Eros perceived something beyond mere physical attractiveness in her composed courage as she faced what seemed certain death. Her dignity in the face of terror, her lack of self-pity despite her unjust fate, and her genuine concern for her parents, who had been forced to sacrifice her, revealed a strength of character that matched her external loveliness. Perseus, fresh from his triumph over the Gorgon Medusa, carried with him not only the magical tools that had made his victory possible, but also the confidence that came from having faced his deepest fears and emerged victorious. Yet when he saw Andromeda, Eros observed a different kind of courage awakening within the young hero. This was not the battle fury that had sustained him through his encounter with the monster whose gaze could turn men to stone, but the tender vulnerability that came with recognizing someone whose happiness mattered more than his own safety. The intervention Eros designed for this crucial moment required unprecedented precision. The situation was too urgent for the gradual development of attraction that characterized his finest work. Perseus would need to fall completely and irrevocably in love with Andromeda in the few moments before he engaged Cetus in battle. Yet this instantaneous passion had to be genuine enough to sustain a lifetime of marriage and partnership. The golden arrow that Eros released at that moment was perhaps his greatest masterwork, crafted not just to inspire attraction, but to reveal the deep compatibility that already existed between these two extraordinary souls. Perseus saw in Andromeda not just a beautiful woman in distress, but a kindred spirit whose nobility matched his own heroic nature. Andromeda recognized in Perseus not merely a powerful rescuer, but someone whose strength was matched by gentleness and whose courage was tempered by genuine caring. The battle with Cetus that followed became more than a heroic encounter between man and monster. It transformed into a declaration of love made manifest through action, Perseus fighting not for glory or treasure, but for the right to spend his life protecting and cherishing the woman who had captured his heart so completely. Every strike of his sword, every strategic maneuver to avoid the creature's massive jaws, every moment of tactical brilliance was motivated by love rather than mere heroic duty. Andromeda's role in the battle was equally significant, though less obvious to casual observers. Her unwavering faith in Perseus, her refusal to despair, even when the fight seemed to turn against him, her ability to remain calm and focused so that she could warn him of approaching dangers he couldn't see, all demonstrated the kind of partnership that would characterize their marriage. She was not a passive prize to be won, but an active participant in their shared destiny. The victory over Cetus established Perseus and Andromeda as one of the great romantic partnerships of the heroic age. But their story also revealed new complexities in how love functioned within the heroic framework. Their marriage faced immediate challenges, from Andromeda's previous betrothal to her uncle Phineus, a political arrangement that had seemed irrelevant when she was destined for sacrifice, but now threatened to create deadly conflict. Eros found himself navigating the delicate balance between honoring legitimate prior claims and supporting authentic emotional connection. Phineus had indeed been promised Andromeda's hand, but he had made no effort to rescue her from her fate, revealing his engagement to be more about political alliance than genuine affection. The resolution required Perseus to demonstrate not just his superior claim through heroic action, but his deeper understanding of what marriage should represent. The confrontation that resulted became a masterclass in how love could inspire not just personal courage, but wisdom about justice and proper relationships. Perseus defeated Phineus not through overwhelming force, but by exposing the fundamental emptiness of a claim based on arrangement rather than mutual choice and affection. The Medusa's head that had served him so well in previous battles remained sheathed, while Perseus used words and moral reasoning to demonstrate why authentic love must always take precedence over mere political convenience. This pattern of love, intersecting with justice and moral complexity, would repeat throughout the heroic age, as Eros discovered that his work now involved not just inspiring attraction between compatible souls, but helping them navigate the complex social and political frameworks that governed heroic society. Love alone was no longer sufficient. It needed to be supported by wisdom, courage, and deep understanding of ethical principles. The story of Theseus and Ariadne presented even more challenging dynamics, as their love developed within the context of betrayal, sacrifice, and conflicting loyalties that tested the very foundations of romantic devotion. When Theseus arrived in Crete as one of the young Athenians sent as tribute to feed the Minotaur, his encounter with Ariadne created ripples that would affect the political balance between Athens and Crete for generations. Ariadne, daughter of King Minos, possessed not only the beauty that had become expected of heroic age princesses, but also the intelligence and courage needed to recognize that the tribute system represented a fundamental injustice that dishonored both Athens and Crete. Her attraction to Theseus was thus both personal and political, representing her unconscious desire to find a way to end the cycle of violence and revenge that had trapped both kingdoms in increasingly destructive patterns. Theseus, for his part, carried the weight of his people's expectations and his own determination to end the tribute system forever. When he met Ariadne, Eros helped him recognize that she represented not just personal happiness, but the possibility of achieving his heroic goals through alliance rather than pure conquest. Their love became a bridge between opposing cultures, a demonstration that understanding and cooperation could accomplish more than force alone. The famous thread that Ariadne provided to guide Theseus through the labyrinth was thus more than a practical tool for navigation. It symbolized the connection between their hearts that would guide them both through the moral complexities of their situation, Ariadne's willingness to betray her father and homeland for love demonstrated the transformative power of authentic affection, while Theseus's acceptance of her help revealed his growing understanding that true heroism sometimes required vulnerability and dependence on others. Yet their story also illustrated the tragic potential that lurked within even the most authentic, heroic romances. The abandonment of Ariadne on the island of Naxos, whether through divine intervention, political necessity, or simple callousness, revealed how external pressures could corrupt even the deepest emotional connections. Eros watched with profound sorrow as circumstances beyond his control separated two souls whose love had seemed destined to reshape the political landscape of the ancient world. The aftermath of their separation taught Eros important lessons about the relationship between individual happiness and larger cosmic purposes. Ariadne's eventual marriage to Dionysus provided her with a form of fulfillment that mortal marriage to Theseus could never have offered, while Theseus's later relationships were shaped by the wisdom and regret he carried from his time with the Cretan princess. Sometimes love served its highest purpose, not through permanent union, but through the transformations it created in both participants. These heroic love stories were observed and studied by the growing populations of mortals who looked to heroes as examples of how to live with honor and courage. The romantic choices made by Perseus, Theseus, and their peers established patterns and expectations that would influence countless generations of ordinary people seeking to understand how love should function within the framework of duty, honor, and social responsibility. Eros began to recognize that his influence was no longer confined to individual relationships, but was helping to shape entire cultural understanding of what love should look like and how it should be expressed. The stories of heroic romance became templates that ordinary mortals used to evaluate their own relationships and make decisions about marriage, fidelity, and the proper balance between personal happiness and social obligation. This cultural influence carried enormous responsibility, as Eros realized that the romantic patterns established during the heroic age would echo through centuries of human civilization. The ideals of romantic love that emerged from these stories, the expectations about masculine and feminine roles in relationships, the understanding of how love should interact with duty and honor, all would shape human society long after the age of heroes had ended. The complexity of this responsibility was further increased by the need to work within the cultural constraints and assumptions of heroic society while still fostering authentic emotional connection and personal growth. The heroes lived within patriarchal social structures that limited women's autonomy and treated marriage primarily as a political and economic arrangement rather than a personal choice. Yet within these constraints, Eros worked to create space for genuine affection, mutual respect, and partnership that honored the full humanity of both participants. The love story of Jason and Medea would test these principles to their breaking point, creating a romantic tragedy that revealed both the transformative power of authentic passion and its potential for devastating destruction when corrupted by ambition and betrayal. Their relationship would become a cautionary tale about what happened when love was subordinated to political convenience and personal advancement. Yet it would also demonstrate love's capacity to inspire achievements that seemed impossible through ordinary means. As the heroic age reached its culmination in the great cycles of stories surrounding the Trojan War, Eros would face his greatest challenge yet, helping to navigate the complex web of attractions, loyalties, and conflicts that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. The love stories of Paris and Helen, Achilles and Patroclus, Hector and Andromache would reveal every aspect of his nature and influence, from the cosmic forces that had shaped creation itself to the intimate personal connections that gave meaning to individual lives. The stage was set for love to prove itself capable of inspiring both the greatest achievements and the most terrible destructions in human history, demonstrating once and for all the awesome power that Eros had wielded since the first moments of cosmic creation. The approaching conflict that would become known as the Trojan War represented a convergence of divine politics, mortal ambition, and romantic passion that would test every principle Eros had developed throughout his cosmic existence. The seeds of this great catastrophe were planted not in the halls of mortals, but in the seemingly innocent celebration of a divine wedding that would spiral into consequences no god could have foreseen. The marriage of Peleus, a mortal hero of exceptional virtue, to Thetis, a sea nymph of extraordinary beauty and power, should have been a joyous occasion that demonstrated the potential for harmony between divine and mortal realms. Eros had worked carefully to foster their attraction, recognizing in their union the possibility of producing offspring who might bridge the gap between human ambition and divine wisdom. Yet the exclusion of Eris, goddess of discord, from the wedding feast created an opportunity for chaos that would ultimately engulf the known world in warfare. When Eris appeared uninvited and cast among the assembled goddesses a golden apple inscribed to the fairest, she unleashed competitive forces that even Eros's influence could not immediately contain. The three goddesses who claimed the apple, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each represented different aspects of power and attraction that had coexisted peacefully within the cosmic order. Their sudden competition threatened to destabilize not just divine relationships, but the fundamental balance between wisdom, authority, and desire that governed both immortal and mortal affairs. Eros watched with growing concern as the dispute escalated beyond mere divine vanity into a conflict that would require mortal judgment to resolve the choice of Paris, young prince of Troy, as arbiter seemed reasonable to those who proposed it. Here was a mortal of royal blood, known for his fairness and aesthetic sensibility, who could presumably evaluate divine beauty without being swayed by political considerations or personal interest. Yet Eros understood immediately that Paris faced an impossible choice that would have devastating consequences, regardless of his decision. Each goddess offered bribes that appealed to different aspects of human nature. Hera promised political power and dominion over vast territories. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle, while Aphrodite tempted him with the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. The very structure of the choice guaranteed that whatever decision Paris made would create enemies among the divine powers, while setting in motion events that mortal wisdom could not control. The moment Paris awarded the apple to Aphrodite, accepting her promise of Helen's love, Eros felt the cosmic order shudder with the implications of what had been set in motion. Helen, wife of Menelaus and queen of Sparta, was indeed the most beautiful mortal woman alive. But her beauty had already created complexities that made her love both precious and dangerous. Her marriage had been arranged partly to prevent exactly the kind of conflict that her attraction might inspire, binding together the major Greek kingdoms through their shared commitment to protecting Menelaus's claim to her affections. The challenge facing Eros was unprecedented in its moral complexity. Aphrodite's promise to Paris was not merely divine interference in mortal affairs, but a commitment that could only be fulfilled through the destruction of existing relationships and political alliances. Helen's marriage to Menelaus, while arranged for political purposes, had developed genuine affection and mutual respect over years of partnership. Their love might not have been the passionate romance of epic poetry, but it represented the kind of mature, stable relationship that provided foundation for family life and social order. Yet Eros also recognized that Helen's attraction to Paris, when it finally occurred, was not artificially imposed, but rather the awakening of a romantic passion that her dutiful marriage had never allowed her to experience. The love that developed between them during Paris's diplomatic visit to Sparta was authentic in its intensity and transformative power, even though its expression would require betraying existing commitments and igniting conflicts that would consume a generation. The ethical dilemma this presented challenged every principle Eros had developed about the relationship between individual happiness and social responsibility. Should authentic passion take precedence over existing obligations, even when those obligations had been honestly undertaken and faithfully maintained? Could love justify actions that would bring suffering to countless innocent people? Was there a way to honor the genuine attraction between Paris and Helen without destroying the political and social structures that their union would inevitably threaten? The solution Eros ultimately chose reflected his growing understanding that love's highest purpose was not always the immediate happiness of the lovers involved, but the larger transformation that their relationship could create in the world around them. Rather than preventing or facilitating Helen's departure with Paris, he worked to ensure that their love, however brief and tragic its ultimate expression, would inspire responses that revealed the full range of human capacity for both nobility and destruction. The war that followed would become a laboratory for exploring every possible manifestation of love within the context of conflict and heroic endeavor. The Greek expedition to recover Helen brought together heroes whose own love stories would illuminate different aspects of romantic devotion, while the Trojan defenders would demonstrate how love of family, homeland, and honor could inspire resistance against overwhelming odds. Achilles arrived at Troy, carrying within his heart a love whose nature Eros found both beautiful and troubling. His devotion to Patroclus transcended ordinary friendship to become something approaching the ideal of two souls united in perfect understanding and mutual commitment. Their relationship embodied the Greek concept of noble love between warriors, where shared danger and common purpose created bonds that surpassed even romantic attraction in their intensity and purity. Yet this very perfection contained the seeds of tragedy, as Eros understood that Achilles' love for Patroclus was so complete and exclusive that losing it would transform him from the greatest of heroes into an agent of destruction whose rage could consume not just his enemies, but the very principles that had made his love beautiful in the first place. The passion that elevated Achilles to heroic greatness also made him vulnerable to a grief that could override every other consideration. Hector, defending Troy against the Greek assault, represented a different but equally profound expression of love through his devotion to his wife Andromache and the infant son Astyanax. Their relationship demonstrated how romantic love could mature into something that encompassed not just personal happiness, but shared commitment to values and purposes larger than themselves. Hector fought not just to protect his family, but to preserve the civilization that made their love possible and meaningful. The tenderness between Hector and Andromache, captured in their final meeting before the battle that would claim his life, revealed love's power to create moments of perfect beauty even in the midst of overwhelming tragedy. Their mutual understanding that duty required him to face almost certain death, combined with their refusal to let that knowledge diminish their appreciation for the time they had together, represented the kind of mature love that Eros found most admirable and most heartbreaking. These parallel love stories, playing out against the backdrop of siege and warfare, created a complex web of attractions and loyalties that tested every aspect of Eros's understanding about how love functioned under extreme pressure. The war revealed that love could inspire both the most noble self-sacrifice and the most destructive revenge, that it could create unbreakable bonds between unlikely allies while also generating hatreds that persisted across generations. The relationship between Paris and Helen, which had triggered the entire conflict, evolved throughout the war in ways that surprised even Eros. Their initial passionate attraction gradually matured into something deeper and more complex as they faced together the consequences of their choices. Helen's growing understanding of the destruction their love had caused created within her a grief that coexisted with continued devotion to Paris, while his recognition of his own inadequacy as a warrior compared to the heroes fighting over his wife generated a humility that made him more worthy of her affection. Their love story became a meditation on the relationship between personal happiness and moral responsibility, demonstrating how authentic emotional connection could persist even when its expression had created suffering for countless others. They neither abandoned their attraction nor allowed guilt to destroy their capacity for tenderness, instead learning to hold simultaneously their love for each other and their sorrow for the pain their union had caused. The siege's duration, stretching across 10 years of intermittent fighting and negotiation, provided time for these various love stories to develop and complicate in ways that revealed new aspects of romantic devotion. Marriages were tested by prolonged separation, new attractions developed between former enemies, and the constant presence of death gave urgency to every moment of connection between lovers who might be parted forever by the next day's battle. Eros found himself working not just with individual couples, but with the entire emotional ecosystem of two civilizations locked in conflict. The wives and lovers waiting in Greece needed different forms of support than the Trojan families living under siege. The warriors on both sides required help in maintaining their connections to the values and relationships that made their fighting meaningful rather than merely destructive. The complexity of this work was further increased by the involvement of other gods whose own relationships and rivalries played out through their chosen mortal champions. Aphrodite's support for Paris, and the Trojans conflicted with Hera's determination to see Troy destroyed in revenge for Paris's judgment against her. Athena's strategic assistance to the Greeks often clashed with Ares's bloodthirsty encouragement of violence for its own sake. These divine politics created situations where Eros's efforts to foster understanding and reconciliation between mortals were complicated by the need to avoid direct conflict with other gods whose own agendas demanded continued warfare. He learned to work within these constraints by focusing on helping individuals maintain their capacity for love, even within the context of justified anger and necessary violence. The most challenging aspect of this work involved helping mortals understand that their enemies were not fundamentally different from themselves, that Trojan mothers grieved for their sons just as Greek wives mourned their husbands, that courage and honor existed on both sides of the conflict, even though justice might ultimately favor one cause over another. This understanding was essential for preventing the war from degenerating into the kind of total hatred that would poison both civilizations for generations to come. As the war approached its climactic phase with the death of Hector and the fall of Troy itself, Eros prepared for the most difficult test yet of his commitment to love's ultimate triumph over destruction. The coming events would reveal whether the connections he had fostered throughout the conflict could survive the complete victory of one side over another, and whether love's transformative power could find expression even in the aftermath of total devastation. The stage was set for love to demonstrate its most profound truth, that it could create meaning and beauty even in the face of ultimate loss, and that its influence would persist long after the immediate objects of affection had been swept away by the inexorable forces of fate and historical necessity. And so our journey through the complete story of Eros comes to its end, though like love itself, his influence continues to ripple through every heart that has ever known longing, every soul that has ever reached across the void to connect with another. From those first moments in primordial chaos, when he opened his eyes and the universe began to desire its own existence, to the great heroic age when love proved capable of inspiring both transcendent beauty and devastating tragedy, we have witnessed the full scope of this ancient god's power and wisdom. Think about this as you drift towards sleep tonight. Every feeling of attraction you've ever experienced, every moment when your heart has recognized something precious in another person, every instance when love has made you braver or kinder or more willing to sacrifice for someone else's happiness, all of these trace their lineage back to that primordial moment when Eros first breathed life into the cosmic dance of connection and creation. The god who began as a vast cosmic force spanning galaxies learned to work with infinite precision in the intimate spaces between individual hearts. The deity who could inspire the formation of stars discovered equal joy in helping two mortal lovers overcome the small fears that kept them apart. This is love's greatest mystery and its most beautiful truth. It is simultaneously the force that holds the universe together and the gentle touch that makes a single life worth living. As you close your eyes and let these ancient stories carry you into dreams, remember that you are part of this eternal narrative. The love you give and receive, the connections you form, the moments when you choose compassion over indifference, all contribute to the ongoing work that Eros began in those first moments of creation. Sleep well, knowing that love itself watches over your dreams and will be there when you wake, ready to help you write the next chapter in humanity's endless love story.